Hey, Deviant friends, it's Dan. Exciting announcement for you. Well, it's an exciting announcement for me, but hopefully it is for you too. Starting next Friday, November 8th, we are going to 2 shows a week. On Tuesdays, you'll keep getting the show that you've become used to, us telling stories about crime and deviance and doing that in-depth journalism and storytelling. And on Friday, we're going to be having conversations. There are so many people out there around the world of crime that we want to meet, and there are great conversations to have with all of them. I'm talking homicide detectives, judges, crime reporters, people who write and direct television shows and movies about crime. They're going to be fascinating conversations, and we want you to participate too. So if you have questions for any of our guests, you can find out about who we're talking to on our Patreon at deviantpodcast.com. And we'll also be putting some stuff on social about that too at deviant.podcast on TikTok and Instagram. The following contains scenes that some may consider, I'll just go ahead and say it, spooky. We're all wired differently. Some of us are wired for good, some of us are wired for bad, but a select few step outside of all society's boundaries. From Cold Open Media, this is a Deviant Halloween. Welcome back to Deviant, where we chase the truth into the dark corners of what humans are capable of. I'm Dan Szematowicz.
And I'm Andrew Iden.
And that's usually what we do, but not today.
Right. We're doing something a little different. And before we get too deep into it, Dan, where do you land on Halloween?
Love it.
Some people don't love it.
Wow, but those people are wrong.
I generally don't like, I didn't like trick-or-treating as a kid.
Did you, Andrew, did you like wear costumes? Did you?
I did. And as an adult, I don't like doing costumes either. It's just, it was never really my bag.
Why does none of that surprise me?
But what I do like is I like October. I like the weather. I like, being outside with people when it's like cool. So I like all that stuff, but it was like the candy and the costumes. Even as a kid, I did it just because everybody else did it, but it was not like, I wasn't one of those kids who had my Halloween costume laid out, 2 months ahead of time.
Sure. Yeah, I was a big costume improviser. Usually, sometimes it went well. Sometimes it did not. I remember when I was 13 or 14, this was a horrible decision. I went trick-or-treating. I went to go as sort of like a, one of those horror movie chainsaw guys, right?
Right.
No one in particular. So I dressed like that and I put on a hockey mask. So I guess I was someone in particular. I guess I was Jason. But
right.
Instead of a chainsaw, we didn't have a chainsaw in the garage. So I carried around hedge clippers around the neighborhood. And that got really old after about 20 minutes.
Yeah, I bet. So the reason we're talking about all of this is because we are obviously, this is Halloween week, and we're doing something a little different this week. We obviously bring you guys on Tuesdays stories that are horrific and terrifying for a million different reasons. We're going to step outside of that this week, and we're actually going to tell you a little bit of fiction.
Yes.
We're going to do some Halloween ghost stories.
Spooky.
And I think everybody likes a ghost story, right?
Yes.
So that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah, we have 3 stories that we're going to bring you. Andrew said they're fictional. Let's just say that I think it's more accurate to say they are inspired by stories that we know or have been told.
Or have some familiarity with.
Yes. Okay, so with all that said, let's tell some ghost stories. So pull up a chair, stick that flashlight under your chins, flip it on, turn down the lights, and prepare to get spooky with our first story, which is going to be told to you by one Andrew Iden.
This story is loosely based on a ghost story that I had been told for years as a kid. I grew up essentially going to a summer camp in Virginia. I worked there. I went there as a camper. I told this ghost story. I was told this ghost story. And it is about a ghost that haunted the summer camp where I worked, which as soon as the sun goes down, any summer camp you go to is just as creepy as it gets.
Question.
So, yeah.
Did you ever see this ghost?
I had very bizarre experiences. I did not see the ghost, but I will tell you, if you've ever been in a horse stable after dark in the pitch black, few things are creepier than a horse stable because there's all kinds of noises. There's all kinds of things going bump in the night. And it is, without question, one of the creepiest places you can be. So with that said, here is the story of Molly May. At Camp Shenandoah, tucked into Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains, the campfire tales for years always ended with the same name whispered on the wind. Molly May. Molly May. Counselors said she'd first come to camp decades ago in the early 1970s. A girl with a wide smile and wild curls, known for her adventurous spirit. She was a bright, energetic 12-year-old, always in overalls and red tennis shoes, and with a relentless appetite for the outdoors. She loved bugs and she loved nature and all that it offered. But one summer, that brightness and that boundless spirit was extinguished. Something at Camp Shenandoah went horribly, horribly wrong. In 1972, under an August moon whose light was splashing across the valley's mountainous walls, Molly May had stepped outside of her cabin and snuck out to Lake Mattaponi. She had dared herself to swim across, breaking the still waters while the stars reflected off the surface. Preparing to dive in, Molly May stood at the water's edge, in front of the stacked canoes, while the crickets and bullfrogs sang. Molly May's adventurous spirit was all alone. She turned and glanced one last time at her cabin, lit by one single yellow bulb on the front porch, mosquitoes buzzing. She'd worried about the creaky screen door as she snuck out, but the counselors and bunkmates weren't disturbed. By morning, when her bunkmates woke up, her bed was still empty. Campers and counselors had fanned out in the woods, calling her name. Camp Shenandoah had turned itself inside out, looking for the energetic young girl in overalls and sneakers. They combed the thick woods, they dragged the lake, and the only thing they found on the lake's western shore 200 yards from that cabin were a set of footprints that stopped before the water's edge. And next to the footprints, a pair of red sneakers. The only thing left behind from the night Molly May vanished. For years, campers and counselors alike say that when the moon is bright and the crickets and bullfrogs sing and the summer nighttime is still, a young girl stands at the edge of the lake, dripping wet, her tangled hair clinging to her pale, shriveled skin. Her head slightly tilted to the left. She casts an empty stare directed at the water, waiting for something, anything, to come to the surface. Counselors say they see her turn, her empty stare meeting theirs, before swiftly disappearing into the hazy fog that skips across the water. 24 years after Molly May disappeared, 11-year-old Jessie, a first-time camper, was dared by her bunkmates to go to the lake at midnight and stand for 2 minutes in the same spot where those red sneakers were found, where the footsteps once were. At the water's edge, Jessie, bold and fearless like Molly May, had accepted the challenge. Jessie loved thrills. And under that moon, as Jessie crept towards the darkened shoreline, a strange chill settled over her. It began at her neck, rapidly moving down her arms, her legs, and to her feet. Just as she was about to put a toe in the water, part of the dare from her bunkmates, Jessie felt the gentle brush of icy fingers across her left forearm. When she whipped her head around to her left, there was nothing there. Only the darkness, only the stacked canoes. And as she turned back towards the murky water, something emerged from the surface. A girl's face as pale as the moon, with curls swirling around her, and her face slightly tilted to the left. It was Molly May, her dark, hollow eyes fixed on Jessie. It was a look of pleading with a touch of anger, and her hand rose from the lake, reaching out, her fingers clawing through the air. She was trying to grab Jesse and grab life itself just one more time. And just as her hand came out of the water, Jesse felt an invisible grip around her right ankle. She could not scream. She could not move. She was paralyzed, frozen in the middle of the summer. The chill permeated through her bones until her friends, worried at her silence, approached Lake Mattaponi and found her standing motionless by the water's edge. When they shook her out of her trance, Jesse finally gasped. The group listened, the grip loosened, and she collapsed onto shore. At Camp Shenandoah, Molly May had never left. And that night, as Jesse approached her cabin shaken, she looked down at the foot of the screen door and she noticed them. She stopped in her tracks. A pair of red sneakers at the foot of the screen door, pointing towards the lake.
Molly May. Molly May.
Welcome back to the Deviant Halloween special, where we're telling ghost stories, stories about things that go bump in the night, things that are just weird and creepy. And Dan, your story, you've actually told me about wanting to write this story down or kind of put this story in some sort of storytelling way for a long time. So tell us about it.
Yeah. I guess the best way to tell the story is to just tell this story. Near Clinton, Michigan, in a remote part of the countryside where the trees are thick and the fog hangs low, stands an old radio transmitter that's been abandoned for decades. It's still there. You can look it up. It clearly used to be some kind of government installation, but locals didn't know much more than that. The signs on the approaching road said that unauthorized personnel were not allowed and would be shot on sight. People in Clinton thought that was extra strange because they never met anyone who was authorized. They never saw anyone enter. They never saw anyone leave. Because of the strange transmissions that would show up on their radios, the rumor was that it was a number station. Number stations broadcast mysterious things, digits. It's weird. They sound like this.
Delta, Foxtrot, Delta, 4-1. Delta, Foxtrot, Delta, 4-1.
During the Cold War, it's thought that spy agencies used them to send and receive messages to agents all around the world. They're a relic of the past. At least that's what my friend Greg Bosek thought. I've been bugging him for years to let me tell this story, and he finally agreed, so here we go. Greg lives in Lafayette, Indiana, and he's a radio nerd. I can relate to that. I am too. In the way I mean it, radio nerds like to scan shortwave radio frequencies. You can find all sorts of weird stuff there. Strange tones and beeps, military calls, people yelling Bible verses. It's spooky stuff.
Slow down! Do you see the light? Do you saw something? Hold up. Scare me. How do you mind control? Press of them.
One night, about 10 years back, as Greg's scrolling through the frequencies, he hears a strange signal, and it's unusually strong. He hits the record button on his machine and can't believe what's coming out of his speakers. Here's a copy of it.
1 5 7 2 8 1 5 7 2 8 1 5 7 2 8 Clinton.
It's a number station, and no one's heard one of those in years. And what the hell does Clinton mean? Greg has to find out. He goes through directories of radio sites and finds an entry for a transmitter in Clinton, Michigan. It's only about 4 hours away, and Greg knows that he absolutely needs to check this out. So one day, he gets in his car and makes the drive. Hours and miles go by, and As he gets closer, he can see the tall tower in the distance, poking out of the woods. As he gets closer, the air turns cold and a sense of unease washes over him. When he gets out of his car, Greg can't make sense of what he's seeing. The entire site is abandoned, the transmitter tower is rusting, and the building that was used to control it, it's fallen apart, completely unusable. It's clear that no one's been here for many, many years. Greg sets up his equipment and begins scanning for signals. He stares at his battery-powered receiver and listens. Nothing. After darkness falls and after hours of silence, Greg begins to pack up. And then a faint transmission crackles through the speakers.
15728
The voice is distorted, but the sequence of numbers is clear.
15728350001100011.
He writes the numbers down in his notebook. And then the transmitter lights up and begins to hum and pulse. More numbers follow, each more urgent than the last. 1, 6, 8, 2, 0. Then 3, 5, 7, 4, 8. As he writes those numbers down too, Greg feels a chill run down his spine and his legs go a bit wobbly. Something is off. And then a whisper echoes through the static. It's barely audible, but it's unmistakable.
They forgot me.
Greg freezes. Is he imagining this? He turns up the volume, but the whisper is gone. He shakes his head, trying to make the pieces fall into place. The tower is transmitting, but who is transmitting? And from where? As far as he can tell, there's no one around for miles. Suddenly, the lights on the transmitter flicker, and they go out. It's pitch black now, and dead quiet. Greg's heart races. The only sounds are the rustle of leaves and the crackle of the radio. Greg's had enough. It's time to go. As he turns to pack up, he hears the voice again, but this time, it's right behind him.
Don't forget me.
This is not a radio transmission. Greg spins around, but sees only shadows. Panic surges, and everything inside of him says, run. As he stumbles towards his car, the tower lights up again, and the radio emits a stream of numbers, each one echoing with a sense of urgency.
15728350001.
He runs, and he drops his notebook, and as he turns to pick it back up, the numbers he'd written down shift into a face. It's twisted and desperate, peering out from the page, mouthing a silent plea. Greg feels paralyzed as the fear roots him in place. With a surge of adrenaline, he snatches up his gear and sprints to his car, the transmitter's numbers still ringing in his ears. He drives away as fast as his car will go, and he never returns. Back home, he tries to decipher those sequences of numbers. He thinks they may hold the key to something important, something beyond his understanding. But no matter how hard he tries, he just can't figure it out. A few years later, the local newspaper in Clinton finally gets around to putting their archive online. This is when Greg finds out about the incident. In 1983, at the height of the Cold War, locals report a bright light and a loud noise coming from the radio tower, the one they're not allowed to get near. They see smoke rising from the forest, and the Clinton Fire Department speeds out there. All they find is a smoldering control building and a perfect circle of burnt grass. The firemen search everywhere, but there's not a soul to be seen. But one of them swears that he heard whispers. Greg knows he encountered something dark that night, an echo of the past, a warning, or perhaps a cry for help from a soul trapped within the static, forever broadcasting its sorrow into the void. You are listening to the Deviant Halloween special, and we hope you are not yet too spooked out and you're still with us and you are enjoying the stories that we're telling. We have one more for you, and it's all right.
You told me you were going to do that. As spooky and haunted cities go, is there anything that trumps Savannah, Georgia?
I love Savannah, Georgia. If you haven't been, let us paint a picture for you. It's one of the oldest towns in America, and it has this sort of Southern Gothic charm to it, and it's supposedly one of the most haunted cities in America, right, Drew?
Yeah, but you know what? They also say that about Charleston. They also say that about New Orleans.
Yes, but I think they're right about it with Savannah.
Yes, Savannah's a great city. And, the Spanish moss, the humidity, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. Savannah is a really, really cool place to visit. And I would not suggest going in July and August because it is so hot.
No.
And it's so humid because you're right next to the water. But yes, Savannah is wonderful. I've enjoyed all the times I've been.
But it is very spooky. And if you do visit there are plenty of ghost tours you can take. And there's just so much to do there. Plenty of great places to drink. Plenty of great places to eat, including having some of the best fried chicken you'll ever have.
Lots of fudge.
A lot of fudge. And a great restaurant called the Pirate's House.
In the heart of Savannah, Georgia, where the air is thick with the scent of magnolias and the echoes of history seem to whisper through the streets, stands the Pirate's House. This storied establishment, built in 1753, has long been a gathering place for locals and visitors alike. But it also harbors a darker side, a tale of lost love and lingering spirits.
Originally, the building was constructed as a home for the gardener of the adjacent colony's trustees, but soon after its completion, it became a notorious tavern for sailors, particularly pirates who were seeking refuge from the law and the sea. The establishment is strategically located near the Savannah River, which made it an ideal stop for those looking to celebrate their recent plunders. Among the many legends that swirl around the Pirate House, the most haunting is that of Captain James, a dashing pirate with a reputation for charm and cunning.
He was a man of the sea, with tales of adventure and treasure that captivated anyone who would listen. And during one of his many visits to the tavern, he encountered a young woman named Anne, the daughter of a local merchant. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and it was love at first sight. They shared stolen moments and whispered promises beneath the flickering candlelight.
As their romance blossomed, Captain James made a fateful vow to Anne. He would embark on one last voyage to secure a fortune for them. He promised to return and marry her. With a heavy heart, Anne watched him sail away, clutching a locket he had given her as a token of his love.
Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. As Anne waited at the window of the Pirate's House, her heart filled with hope, the townsfolk began to whisper that she was losing her mind. Friends and family urged her to move on, but she remained steadfast, convinced that James would come back to Savannah to marry her.
But it was not to be. James found his treasure, but the captain's fate took a tragic turn. He met his end in a fierce storm at sea. His ship, lost, along with all its crew, swallowed by the relentless waves.
When word of the shipwreck reached Savannah, it shattered Anne's heart. She was never the same. Day after day, she would return to the Pirate's House, her once bright spirit dulled by grief. She would sit in a corner, gazing out to the river, waiting for a ship that would never come.
After many years, with her eyes always on the horizon, Anne died. As years passed, patrons began to notice strange happenings in the tavern, flickering lights, sudden chills, and the faint sound of sobbing. Locals believed that Anne had become one with the Pirate's House, bound to its walls by the love she could not let go.
And as the tavern continued to thrive, stories of its ghostly inhabitants only grew. Staff and guests report experiencing unexplained phenomena, glasses sliding off tables, cold spots in the middle of summer, and soft whispers that seem to come from nowhere. On stormy nights, the atmosphere shifts dramatically. The air is charged and the sound of thunder echoes like the roar of the ocean.
It's on these nights that many claim to feel the presence of Captain James, a shadowy figure dressed in tattered pirate garb. Regular patrons know the tales well and share them with newcomers. They whisper that if you listen closely, you might hear the captain's voice in the wind, a haunting echo that carries the words, "I'll find you. I will always find you."
Dan, these were really fun.
Yeah,
I enjoyed doing quasi-fiction for once.
quasi-fiction.
And I enjoyed a little bit of a lighter storytelling.
Yeah, man, it was good times. I had fun doing that with you. And next year, we'll do it again. But for now, we hope you all have a safe and fun Halloween, and we will see you next time.
Check the apples for razor blades.
Oh, urban myth. Urban, right? Is it? I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. Has that ever actually happened?
It had to have? I don't know. Anyway, till next time, thanks for listening. Deviant is written, produced, and executive produced by Clark Goldband, Andrew Iden, and me, Dan Szematowicz, with editorial and production consultation from the great Jenny Ament and original scoring from Shuvo Sir.
Sales, marketing, and distribution support from our good friends at Gemini 13. Deviant is a production
of Cold Open Media.